We invest so much into things like incident management, disaster recovery, backups, testing backups in tech. But I don't think most technology companies do the same with HR or operations.
The impact of your no decision is bigger than bad decision. At least that's what the experience has taught me.
This is actually what people pay you for. Yes, making decisions is super hard, which is why the leadership above you delegates to you with some level of autonomy and some checks.
And that's a really hard thing to reconcile when there is this overpaid person that doesn't have the skill to get promoted and wondering where sort of bonus.
Hi, I'm Alla. Welcome to the Innovective podcast. Today we'll talk about the hard and really hard things managers have to do in their work. Things that few managers like to talk about, but which are absolutely critical to the success of both the people on their teams and the organizations they work for. We will discuss career development choices, becoming a manager, or moving along the individual contributor track, the difficult decisions managers must learn to make, resolving conflict and setting expectations, and some of the toughest once-in-a-career challenges we've faced as managers personally. I'm joined by a former colleague and work friend, Lautaro Orazi. Pero has started as a full-stack polyglot engineer, eventually becoming a tech lead, then engineering manager, and then director of engineering at Monks. Welcome to the podcast, Taro. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Alla. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
You know what this reminds me of? A few years ago, we had these engineering leadership huddles every Friday, and we discussed some of the hardest and most fulfilling topics about engineering leadership, people management. It was my favorite time of the week or of every 2 weeks, and now it feels the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember those great sessions we had. And more than the topics and the difficult topics that we used to discuss, there was like having that group where you can explain problems that you are facing right now and get this different perspective. You might not have like the answer to your problem, but at least you have new information. So yeah, those were great.
And you know what I really enjoyed about working with you, but also hearing your voice in that group? You were one of the few people in my career who really never, ever, ever shied away from the super unglamorous parts of being a people manager and a technology manager. You never hesitated to do the hard things. You just dove straight in and got on with it. And I think this is why some of your reports and peers respect you still now, even though we work in different places.
Thank you, Alia, for saying that. Well, it's easy for people to focus on the idea, on the happy path for the manager, right? Like on the technical stuff, on like when the team is already performing, like everything's shiny. But the real growth, the real impact happens behind the scenes, and there is a lot of work there with HR, with legal, with TA, with other managers. So new managers in general don't realize all the hard work that happens behind the scenes.
So before we start with the hard topics, moving our way up from the easier bits to the hardest that no one speaks about, let alone on camera, I want to ask you a burning question. So you've moved your way up from a full stack independent engineer all the way through specialized engineer, team leader, engineering manager, director of engineering. There is now a very high need for polyglot or full stack engineers. Many companies are compacting their teams, trying to move faster, work more closely between engineering, product, and design. And everyone wants a full stack or an engineer who can and wants to do everything. But there are not enough of those on the market. How can we grow more of those so much needed full stack engineers, given that you've been one and managed some?
I have an unpopular opinion about this. Not all individuals are going to get there at some point, right? What you're describing there is like a generalist, is someone that think about the product end to end and not just about how you're going to implement it. So these kind of engineers focus on the what and why, right? Uh, and there are engineers out there that wants to focus more on the development side, and that's what's being kind of like a danger with AI, like all the more like just regular development is being replaced with agents and that, and it's going to continue, right? There is no deny that AI is going to get better, so we need to embrace that, and that's why companies are putting their money on the engineers, right? The real engineers, the problem solvers, those that just don't shy away from doing the research, learning new things, and and the way that you grow them is, first of all, you need to identify those profiles. In general, you need to talk with your engineers, know them better, what decisions they have made in their careers, right? That's important because some of them decide at some point they want to just focus on one stack, and they are going to do only one stack, and it's going to be really difficult to move them out of that. So, but there are others that are more product minded, as I mentioned before, and if you identify those profiles, you need to put them in these situations where they will need to make decisions, need to be autonomous, they will need to do the research and come up with proposals. And you increasingly put them in those situations even harder and harder, and coach them along the way. And if you manage to do that, you're going to have at the end of the road like a full stack generalist engineer that you will be able to deploy in any kind of situation, and they will be able to perform just well.
So it's about creating the opportunities. It's not even about calling someone a full stack engineer and saying, do this now. It's about kind of sneakily saying, hey, could you please do a little bit more than we usually expect of you and go do an entire chunk of work? I know it's outside your stack, but I'm sure you can do it.
Right, right. And something I say to my manager once is, when did you stop asking me what I wanted to do, right? So it's just don't be, as a manager, don't be hyper focused on what you want someone to do. Just keep in mind that you need to continue asking them, okay, what do you want to do in your career? It is something that you're willing to do or not, right? Never stop asking, because a no could become a yes at some point. But most of the time, my experience, a no is a no, and you also need to respect that.
Have you ever had someone say, I don't want anything to do outside of my main stack? Say, I'm a C#
Oh,
engineer, don't make me do front end. I hate front end, never going to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
yeah, I had a ton of them, and they were just close in that position, and you need to respect that. It might not be what you need at the moment, but some people just don't want to do, like, either because they had like a bad experience, or because they don't have the experience, or they don't want to look like they are juniors again while doing work. So yeah, you need to respect that. But I have faced a lot of those situations in the past.
Let's move into the harder topics, starting with the easiest one. So you're an individual contributor, you're doing what you want, you get the opportunity, and you're considering the opportunity to move into management. You get promoted or you become an interim. What are the top 5 things you have seen new managers struggle with, at first at least?
I would say that the main thing that happens, and I can say this because that was my own experience, is jumping into this position, having all this energy, and figuring out that you cannot change like 90% of the things that you wanted to change, right? Because you start understanding the politics, the decisions, and the complexity that happen behind the scenes. So that could be really a really, really hard work for new managers. And I have seen a lot of them a bit demoralized by the situation. But talking about like mistakes or things that they struggle with, uh, one of the main things is learning to be more hands off, or start delegating more, because you have until this point you have been really hands on, you have been really involved in everything and making decisions with the team. But now you need to slowly start like letting the team do the thing while you're supporting them. And for a lot of new technical managers or engineer managers, it's something that they struggle with. Um, another important struggle, at least I remember at the beginning of my career as a manager, is switching the approach on one-on-ones. Like So you still just keep them as tactical one-on-ones that focus on work and problem solving, like everything related to what you're doing, the project that you're working on. And as you grow as a manager, you start focusing more on the people aspect, on just connecting with individuals, knowing more about them, what motivates them, because ultimately that's the way that you're going to help them grow, like by knowing them at the personal level. So just changing the focus on one-on-one is something that every new manager struggle with. Um, and I think one of the important ones is everything related to HR, right? So you on board as a manager, you get the HR manual to read, but honestly, you don't have any experience. You're jumping into a new position, like it's a higher position in the ranks, but you start as a junior on that position. And the sooner you realize that you are a junior now, the better, because you have a lot to learn, and you will learn a lot from experiences. And HR experiences, I will say, are the most difficult ones because it requires not only to solve non-technical issues, but also to just collaborate with other departments at any company, like HR, legal, etc. Um,
I second that. I've seen a type of managers who are genuinely surprised that they're not just a team lead now, responsible for delivery or the technical quality, they're also responsible for the people and some of the things they naively didn't think come with the job. Many technical managers genuinely hate performance reviews and pay reviews because they think that someone else as an HR is going to handle this, where the reality is they have to learn to do this. And what I've seen with really good team leads is they sometimes struggle to keep the business perspective when it comes to handing out raises, promotions, and bonuses. Because if they've done their technical and delivery job right, they love their team, they cherish their people, they think everyone is amazing, and they want to give them the best, and they escalate the pay rises beyond what maybe the industry or the company trajectory is, and get burned very quickly because after a certain point they can no longer sustain their approach. So this is something that I've seen new managers fail at, but also I've seen people recover from it, learn really well, and pass it on to their management reports when they grew up the ladder.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Most of the new managers kind of like get promoted in really good market situations or when the company is doing good, and that sometimes is not really great because you don't get the bad part of the job, right? And this is something I have been doing with new managers, like with time is just before promoting them is talking to them about the bad things about management, not the bad things but the challenges, the hard part of the job, not only the shiny and really good stuff that you're going to do as a manager, but also like the difficult situations that you're going to make decisions about people, you're going to make decisions that might like, hurt people, and that's not something that all managers are ready to do at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I just came up with an analogy between the technical side of management, but just development and people management. So before a junior or even trainee manager, let's call it what it is. It's a trainee manager. It's someone who doesn't even know the skill when they start the position. Before they are ready to fly on their own, they're almost like a junior engineer who is genuinely surprised when they find a bug in an open source library. I've seen someone be absolutely astounded and they said, "Oh, I found a bug in React." And I said, "Oh my God, this is brand new information." And it's the same when junior managers are surprised by someone, for example, not turning up to work for a bad reason. You know, someone went out, had too much to drink, and didn't turn up to work when something critical was planned. It is not something your standard HR manual covers. They don't tell you that explicitly how to handle it. They tell you this is our promotion cycle, this is our pay review, this is our grievance procedure, etc., etc. But they don't say if your report got dead drunk at a party and got lost under the bridge and didn't show up to work the following day. This is also a normal part of people management, unfortunate, but it happens more often in some industries than others. They're genuinely surprised about that, and it doesn't make them a bad manager. It just reflects how junior they are. They haven't experienced anything off the standard documentation path.
Yeah, but because in general they have been kind of like shielded from those kind of situations, right? Like as an individual contributor, as a team lead, you're not sitting at that table making those decisions, and probably you're not receiving the information as it is, right? You are just receiving a more refined like communication about what happened with someone in particular. So it's
Absolutely.
really when you get into that table when you start knowing the real reasons of things happening.
You are leading us to a more advanced topic. I wanted to leave it for later, but now is a good time. Politics. People have different views on whether and how to shield or not shield, partially expose your teams and your team members to politics. Now, for aspiring managers, it's important to get that exposure. It's almost like a vaccine to some of the difficult things in their future jobs. What is your stance on that? How do you shield or not shield your teams from politics?
Well, I don't think it's a black or white situation. In most of the cases, you need to expose your team to politics a bit. So at least they're aware of what's happening with the company, with the project, with your client. So, and the main reason is so they don't get surprised when something happens, right? The worst that can happen to a team is that get surprised by the client just disappearing from one day to the other, right? So you need to expose your team to the politics of the company, the politics about client relationship. So at least they know what's going on. I think in the past I would say that I would have said shield your team from every kind of like interference, but I have seen the impact on politic decisions on the team, and the team was unaware and impacted them heavily. Whereas there are also situations where they were aware of what's going on and were preparing for that moment, right? So when the time came, they were ready to act or to rather than react.
Do you have any example that you could share about this?
Well, yeah. Well, on the client side, like just communicating them on how the relationship with the client is going, right? And if there is something like new leadership on the client side, and what is this new leadership approach, like that kind of information is useful for the team, uh, because they can get prepared for how they're going to interact with this leadership and internally with the company. Uh, so you need to know what the leadership is cooking all the time, right? If they are just thinking on an acquisition or being acquired, or if they are planning on just launching a new product or a new service, uh, just that kind of information, I will share it with the team and make sure that they understand what's going on. If there is something like an upcoming layoff, right? That's something I would just be really sensitive about how I let the team know. It's going to be more subtle and not just so direct. But it's about how you manage that information and how you communicate that.
I've once seen this managed to the top of my expectations when working in a company which was acquired by a larger company in the same industry. And then the competition authority in the United Kingdom was reviewing that acquisition because they deemed it stifled competition. And the leadership kept the entire team up to date in full transparency throughout the entire process, because there were things you could read on the news, but they didn't give enough detail. A lot of HR and comms training went into this, but it was as transparent as you can imagine. And when eventually, unfortunately, the acquisition and merger fell through because the competition authority blocked it, the team was obviously disappointed, especially people with equity, but they were not completely caught out. So the damage was much lower. And I've seen it be super important with clients when we were working with a new team that the client hired to take over from us consulting for 2 years, building the platform for 2 years. And that team was very, very nervous and defensive. They were a bit out of their depth. They were under pressure to perform quickly, take the knowledge over quickly. So they got defensive, maybe a little bit aggressive. And giving the context to the consulting team of what was going on, what was going through the heads of those new developers, how to better approach them, where to seek advice. It has really helped the transition. I think without that support, and some consultancies I worked at where it would not have been given, without that support, it could have turned a beautiful relationship into an ugly standoff with the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And most with the clients, right? And with new leadership, with new teams, and when you're working as a consultant, you can be perceived as like an external force trying to get them fired.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to have that transparency with them, and just meet them where they are. And that's we always say, like meet where they are, and just try to support them, and come as a supportive layer, and not something like pushing them to do something that they're not prepared for. So more like just move with them along the way.
I want to step back into the beginning of the topic. You mentioned something really good about new managers, that they come in and they think, right, I have the crown now. I'm going to change everything because I'm the king or queen. Have you seen people go into management for the wrong reasons and seeking power and thinking that power comes with a title and control comes with a title is one of the things I consider the wrong reason to go into management. So have you seen people seek out leadership positions where actually they wanted something else and were good at something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen people just wanted the title, right? And other people that it's not more about the title because they think they're already there when they are clearly not there, but they think they are there and they want it. And I have seen people just thinking they want to go in that direction, but just because nobody explained them what are the other options, right? Yeah, so and there are those individuals that just never were explained the other options. So they think that there's only one path in the company and they just want to go there because they see as the only way of growing. So as a manager, want to make sure that you explain to all your managers uh, what are the companies, career ladders, what are the paths, and just support them on what they want to move forward with. I have tried to convince people to become managers to then realize, like talking with them, that they really wanted to be staff engineers. Even if they had all the ingredients to become a manager, they really wanted to become stay on the engineer, like more technical path. So supporting them on that path as well. And I also had individuals that didn't have all the skills to become managers, but they were humble and hard workers and really wanted to get there. And obviously, I will never try to convince them to just not try to get there. I will support them on growing that direction. They will move slower, they are going to eventually get there, and they will become good managers. I would rather just work with someone that is humble, that is hardworking, than someone that just think they deserve the title because they have done some good stuff on their teams.
I have seen someone like that I refer to as a diamond in the rough. He grew from tech lead, pure tech lead, to almost director of engineering. Had there not been a reorg, he would have become a director. And I spoke to him 50 times a week about, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to go above engineering manager? Because he was a good engineering manager, but senior engineering manager and director involved so much more politics, reporting, negotiation, compromises, often on the technical side. And he was a techie. And he worked really hard and he refused to even consider not going for that role. And he made it up. It took a very long time because, as you said, some skills were missing, some personal attributes were missing, which had to be trained. But he made it there and was quite successful. And I really respect people who know what they want and go after this. But at the same time, I love to nudge people who are going into management for the wrong reasons in the direction that will make them much happier. So this once I interviewed a lovely candidate for a director of engineering position, and he was kind of ticking all the boxes, but in the interview process, I just kept thinking, it looks like he wants to be a principal engineer. He just isn't saying it, and he's good at it, and he can be a director. And I think in the end, he ended up going to work for Meta or something as a director of engineering. But I thought, oh my God, this is someone whose eyes light up when they talk about influencing the engineering culture, building new internal systems, building new internal team topologies, speaking at events, presenting, finding new ways to explain things. And I did tell him, I said, look, we have the director position, but we also have a principal position for a different team, and you might want to go for it. He did go for it. I don't remember exactly why we didn't end up hiring him, but it was an interesting experience to see that dichotomy of I'm applying for one, but actually I want to do the other.
Yeah, it's difficult because I guess my background is on engineering. I have education on engineering. I have been an engineer for so many years, and my heart is with engineering, right? And the moment you choose to go in the management path, you kind of like get farther away from the action. And I know, and most of the time it just is a decision I need to revisit internally and convince myself that I'm going the right thing, going to the more people management politics, and because I really love to do engineering and being super low level with the team on the trenches. So yeah, I can understand that candidate and why he was in that constant conflict internally about one thing or the other.
Hmm. Especially when you're good at both, right? So if you're not so good at one thing, and you just fall into the right position. If you're good at both, you kind of have to choose yourself.
Well, I don't know if you are good at both, but if you are passionate about both, that is really hard to choose from one or the other.
Absolutely. And you mentioned another thing, people not having skills to go into management, but working hard on them. When companies are in a period of rapid growth, especially, sometimes we're faced with a situation, and you and I have been there. We have done, what, tens, dozens, hundreds of interviews together. Mm-hmm. It was just a blur of interviewing 24/7 for months to try and grow the team and find those new leaders. And you have to make a choice between promoting someone internally who has the right vibe, has the right fit for the team, who's already established, knows the company, knows the products, but doesn't have the engineering skills yet, or hiring externally and effectively closing the door for them, at least temporarily. And you have to make that choice. How do you go about that choice?
Well, it's difficult questions. I like both. I like to promote internally, and I also like to hire managers. And I think there are different situations where you would prefer to promote. If you have the right environment, if you can have that support network ready for new hires, like just going back to our previous conversation, these are new managers, but these are new junior managers, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have experience. They will need to figure things out. They will need to get the experience, like mostly with HR, like a human relationship and conflict, etc. So when you promote a new manager, that's true. You're just putting someone in a position where they can keep promoting the culture of the company. They know what's going on, but they don't have the experience to manage like a really complex situation. And that's when I like new hires, like experienced managers that already went through different battles, so they will come, they will know what to do, and and also they will come with a fresh pair of eyes, so they can easily break the status quo on a team because they don't have the bias that every new manager has built by working with a team. Right? So new managers are really good to just find those things where things can be improved that you might not be seeing because of your biases, but also they come with experience. And we already talked about like new managers not having like basic HR skills, and in general, a new manager that you hire with experience will come with that experience. Again, if you have the opportunity to promote, because that in the long run is the best approach for the company. That's how you cultivate the culture of the company. That's how you send that message to the team that there is a path forward for everyone just wanting to go into management. And here's the proof, right? We're promoting this person today as a manager.
I'm picking up so much from you that we haven't discussed in previous Friday conversations. It's great. I have learned so many lessons from choosing between hiring and promoting. And one of them is if you promote someone who is not ready, you have to make sure that they can handle this at their peak stress. And when I say stress, I don't mean, passing stressed out at work. I mean stress as in being pushed to the absolute limit of their mental, physical capacity, because they will also have to deal with anything unexpected that comes up on a team. So even if someone really, really wants to step into that position, I could say no, someone else will, or hire externally, if I think that they're not going to be able to finish the marathon, so to say. And the other thing is, I try to promote internally as opposed to hiring externally if, for whatever reason, the situation on the team is political or something has been brewing for a while. For example, there has been a reorg and people have been shuffled around. The project or client has been difficult and the team happiness score is low. It's very rare that a new person can turn it around quick, and you're risking making it worse, as opposed to if you promote someone who's almost ready and already knows the situation. You're still supporting them, but at least you're not introducing a massive change into the team.
Yeah, that's true. But I also see situations that I have like managed situations where rotating another manager and put them in the mix was the only solution possible, right? Like no, nothing I could do internally on the team will change the approach because like you have like this alignment already on the team, and as human beings we reject change. So my experience with that was just okay, I'm going to put someone different in the mix, and someone's that are going to make the difference and is going to show them a different way of doing things. And I know that it could have backfired, but I actually ended up working really well. That made that click on the team saying, okay, this is the way that Taro was telling us that we should be doing. Sometimes it's just about just leading by example, and just putting someone that can just be disruptive enough to show that it's really important. It could be a new manager or a rotation, but sometimes you cannot solve things internally. You need someone external to break the status quo.
I remember a few people that we hired, and just going mentally through the list of people that we hired together for one of your big clients. And I remember when injecting, so to say, new blood really helped. And
yeah, I can think of multiple of those situations where, well, actually, we hired engineer managers that didn't move the needle, so to speak, but we hired really good managers that really have like a really impactful approach with the team, and they were able to change and adapt to the team, and but just make them move forward.
And I think it also depends heavily on the type of manager, their personality, their style, because what will work for one project would not work for another. Again, I'm imagining all these people in my head and thinking, oh my God, if we put this person on this team at that moment, although they're qualified, it would have been a complete disaster. Everything would have gone to hell. Because we added someone who brought that freshness, positivity, maybe relaxed some of the requirements a little bit, but had the team sit back and get some perspective on what was going on, which they didn't have before because it was very delivery focused, strict, and crisis management full. That really helped.
Yeah. Well, I have managed like group of engineers, like individual contributors and group of managers. And the same way that you have different types of engineers, like you have front and back end, like this engineer might be good at databases, these others might be better at quality or security. The same happened with the engineer manager group. You have like your toolbox, and each manager is a different tool, and you need to know what they are good at, and just use them in the right situation. So if you need someone that is, so you have a project where you really need to focus on delivery and move things forward, then maybe you would choose like one type of manager. But maybe in some for some client you need someone that has more business acumen, someone that can have a really good skills managing stakeholders. So you would choose that kind of engineer manager. So I like that diversity on the management group. Like I don't like all the managers being the same, having the same skills. You need like that diversity there.
Mm. And I really appreciate environments where you can have different flavors of managers. Sometimes companies narrow it down a lot, maybe because when it's a product company, there's more or less a single vision of how it should operate. In a consultancy, it's different. Like, all of our managers have to be hands on. But then again, I don't think it was you and me, I think it was Fede and me who hired someone, not saying who, based in Florida. And the first time I met them, I was like, is this a joke? How can a person be so positive and full of energy? It's a little bit like Alec Baldwin on Friends vibes. So I actually thought he was taking a mickey. And then I've learned that he is probably one of the best people managers I've seen in my life, because he maintains that extremely positive perspective even through the hard times while doing the difficult bits about people management, but not very technical. So would have to rely on an engineering manager or team lead with the hands-on technical skills to do that part of the job. But then again, I would say not required. In some organizations, I understand you have to have everyone highly technical if it's a purely platform, deep tech product or process. Everyone has to know what it is about. Speaking about hiring a little bit more, sometimes you have to make decisions about budgets where junior managers struggle with promotions, etc. And occasionally you do want to stretch the budget that you have for the role or the level. Now, there are many problems that come with that, which you have to deal with later, but it can be a power tool when the company grows or when you have a massive opportunity for expansion or a new product line or a new client. And you have to consider it as one of the tools. So if you're saying never hire out of budget, you're probably an enterprise and past the innovation stage. What are your thoughts about deciding on when to hire out of budget?
Yeah, well, I think there are different situations. Obviously, the obvious one is market conditions. Right? You have a budget, but you go to the market. Honestly, like there are not many engineers at the level that you expect for the budget you have. So you might decide to hire like, out of the budget in that case if you really need 10 new people in your team. And sometimes about securing talent, right? Like probably you have the opportunity to hire someone that is really good on what they do, and it's not in your budget, but you decide that that is a strategic good move for the company to have someone like that person, and you just hire out of budget. And the other situation can I think of where you hire out of budget is when you need a particular expertise that your team doesn't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can grow people into that, but it takes a lot of time, right? Just raising an AI expert like that can train models and then do data analysis and data engineering could take time. Or you can go to the market and find a good one, right? That could start the discipline in your team, and you don't want like the mid-level person. You want a senior one, someone with experience that can come in and be a leader of that particular technology or that particular discipline. In that case, I will just go out of budget and find someone really good.
And that's another thing that we should explain to new managers, that when you go into these positions, sometimes you will have to make these decisions, taking into account what they're going to cost you in the future, and you will have to sell these decisions and advocate them to the rest of the team, to the management, etc., etc. And it's not an easy one, and you can't say it's not my job, I'm just a technical manager. It is part of the business, and you're getting as you move up, you get more and more business exposure, and it's not optional. You cannot opt out of of that part of the role.
Well, there are many managers like junior and experienced one that just don't want to make decisions, and they find ways to just not being part of the decision or just not making the decision at all, and that's not great for the manager. So I always say like a bad decision is better than no decision. And I just that's something I coach my managers constantly, is that you need to make decisions with information you have at the moment, and probably it's going to be a bad decision, but it's a decision. What happens if you don't do anything about it? You could not make the decision of hiring out the budget and spend like 6 months trying to build an AI department in your company. So the impact of your no decision is bigger than bad decision always. At least that's what the experience has taught me.
Yeah, and this is actually what people pay you for, because if you, yes, making decisions is super hard, which is why the leadership above you delegates it to you with some level of autonomy and some checks. Because if they were the ones making all of the decisions, nothing would work, because everything just flows eventually up to one person. So it's a core part of the job that you have to accept when you're just starting on the journey. So we're getting into the territory of harder things, and we'll start with what might seem like the hard one, but I think is actually one of the easier ones: managing conflict. But to make it harder, because you're a director, we're not going to talk about things like two team members having a technical disagreement and being unable to decide, or people on the team not liking each other, or someone being passive aggressive and putting everyone off working with them. We're going to talk about the hardest things. So what are the toughest conflicts you have had to manage in your career? I'm going to go first. I have had to try and mediate between two senior engineering managers who had so much animosity between them that had we had a meeting in person instead of the Zoom call that we had, I'm pretty sure that punches would have been thrown. So even on a Zoom call, the amount of aggression was close to breach of contract. And it was really, really difficult to witness this, because both were bright engineering and people leaders, but the human side just took over. And this is where at one point I felt like I almost reached my limit. So I asked for, number one, HR to get involved, just as a calmer side observer, and asked advice from even more senior management, so basically C-level with 40 years of experience. What are your horror stories?
Well, I have a similar one. I don't think it was that extreme, but also like two managers that, and on a casual conversation, they will be okay, but when it comes to talking with the team or just making decisions with the team, you can just feel that animosity in the air. To the point that they were having the arguments in front of the team, but not including the team on the decision. It was like one against the other most of the time. And even at some point, I suspected that they would just disagree with the other one because they wanted, and not because they were disagreeing in the 1st place. So it was a really difficult situation. That was, I guess, the first time that I had to really, really collaborate with the other managers to solve the situation. To just really, really just have conversations, like even out of working hours, like just taking a shower and thinking how we're going to solve this, because of how impactful the conflict was. But at the end, I guess that we were able to put them in a situation that they will agree on the ways of working, even on the disagreement. They needed to find a way to compromise on a way of working. And the other one was a big one because this was a complete management team, including design and engineering and product, like having a really big, it's not a visual conflict like something that is just described like punches and like, but more like they were in constant conflict with the leadership of the program. And you can just feel that on conversations. You heard about someone crying after a meeting, things like that. And that was really, really hard to navigate because in a lot of cases, you will solve the problem by removing someone from the equation, but sometimes you can't. And you need to work with what you have. And I remember working with HR at the point, with people experience, and everyone just was aware of the situation and giving advice on how to approach it. And the way that I managed that situations was, again, like direct feedback, just saying the things that maybe the other person they didn't want to hear, but just say it in a direct way, in a constructive way, and coaching a lot, because it was not like bad intentions for a person, was like lacking some skills of how to address the team in a way that didn't hurt the relationship with them. That was a pretty big conflict, and I don't think that we fully solved that, but at least we make it easier for everyone to handle it day by day.
Sometimes it's just about minimizing damage. So it's just damage control as opposed to management, isn't it? I'm thinking about how much more impactful conflict is the higher up the level you go. So I've personally witnessed things like falling out of founders or completely unproductive relationships between C-suite team members who are effectively, they are on the same team and yet they cannot work effectively together. And sometimes it is about damage control. But what this reminds me of in real life, think about it, it's essentially like when parents are fighting, it affects everyone who is below them on the org chart so deeply, and they feel so powerless, and yet they have to work around this somehow.
Yeah. And one thing is that they are having that fight like closed doors, but at the end of the day, they compromise on the solution, and then they address the team in a different way. But other is when they are having that fight from everyone, and that's the most difficult conflict. It might not be a big conflict, but like the optics are different. Like the team is observing that they are scared of what happening, why they're just so conflicted, and the more the more you go up the ladder, the worse it gets. Right? If you see your CEO like fighting with CDO in a conversation where like there is a lot of people that just will be afraid of what's going on with this company. Obviously.
Yeah, the open fights of senior levels are definitely something that leaves a mark, and it just makes it through the grapevine to everyone and has lasting damage. So you have to effectively learn to be a diplomat as you move up the ranks to avoid things like this happening, because that's reminiscent of conflict between, say, two states, where the stakes are really high, and you think that you're just having some banter with the president of a different country, and then the following day or the same day the markets crash because everyone panics about what's going to happen. So this is about managing conflict created by someone else. Sometimes you have to initiate what I would refer to as productive conflict, and usually it comes down to managing and resetting expectations. So, for example, you get a new report, you inherit them maybe from someone else, or you hire someone and they're on probation, and you have to tell them that maybe they're not as good as they thought they were, and initiate a review of their performance.
Yeah, well, that's more common than you think, right? Like, I have inherited people from other managers a lot of times, and there is a different level of you expect like someone at the level because that's what you were like talk about, and then when you see that person in action, you say, okay, I can see all the gaps here. But to me, it's important to just be transparent again, and going back to radical candor, just start that conversation as soon as possible. Most of the time, the people receiving this feedback will not like it, and you have in general two kind of person: the one that will just say, okay, you're right, I can see what you're telling me, let's work on a plan on how we're going to improve it. And then the other kind of person that will say, what are you talking about, and just good, right? And you need to choose your approach depending on the profile you're working with. It is the person that just accept that there are gaps and they are just willing to work on that plan. And I think that's the best situation, because you create a partnership and create a really long-term relationship with the person, that if they manage to close the gap, they are going to be really good, and they are going to be really loyal to you at the end of the day. But the other profile is really difficult because they will not collaborate with you. They will not accept they are doing something wrong. And that's when you need to start like the formal documentation, just working with HR. And this is something that if I can give an advice to any manager is, as soon as you have these kind of conflicts, when you don't see like a resolution that is collaborative, involve HR. Not because you want to fire the person immediately, but because if at some point you need to fire someone, the process is long. You need to document everything. And if you just don't do that from the get-go, by the time that it gets like to a point where you need to fire someone, you will find out that if you need to start the documentation at that point, it was going to take you like, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months to get that person removed from your team. So it's really important to collaborate with HR. They are really there for one reason, and it's to support managers on this kind of situation. So the sooner you involve them on a conflicted situation like this, the better. This person doesn't need to know that HR is involved until a later stage, but at least you know what documentation needs to be doing, how you should be communicating that to the person, etc. So it's really important here in these kind of situations where first you're transparent about the gaps, and then that you try to collaborate with them. And if they are not collaborating with you, then you need to involve HR as soon as possible.
And this is where HR can actually force you to do the right steps as a manager in difficult situations, because they will force you to give feedback transparently in writing, give the person that time to reflect, to decide, etc. Because you might think, oh, okay, I've told them that they're not up to the standard for this role, but you haven't told it clearly. You hadn't explained what the consequences are, what their options are. Maybe there's an option to step down into a different role. Why not? Some people will take it, HR may come across as quite brutal and the executioners, but many people I've worked with in that profession, including one of the HR directors that you and I both know, are excellent coaches with decades of experience, and they help make it both fair but also real in terms of that you're working for a business. And then on the flip side, I've seen these processes handled in a really bad way, where the feedback was swept under the carpet by multiple managers who managed the person over the course of, say, a year and a half. And when it came to the brave one, the Taro of the team, to deliver the verdict and say, look, you're not performing in your role, you have to adjust. So it wasn't a conversation about exit, but it was a conversation about you have to adjust fast. This is an informal message now, but we'll review this in a few weeks and we might start a formal process. The person was really, really hurt because for the past year and a half, no one had told them they were not underperforming. And that then results in quite ugly fights that no one really wants, when you could have had constructive conflict in the very beginning. Have you had to deal with the consequences of junior or just very excited soft managers overpaying someone? For example, I've inherited team members who were paid 30% maybe or more above what they should be paid. So they were maybe barely making the mark on their role, but they were okay. They were not underperformers, but they were paid at the top of the bracket or maybe even over the top. That is something I found really difficult to reset, because when everyone else is getting raises, they're not. And it's hard for them because they say, well, what about inflation? And you say, well, you're paid above your level anyway. And then you feel for them as human beings, because everyone wants to grow financially.
Yeah. Well, we have talk about like hiring out of budget. Yeah, well, it's a difficult situations when that happens. I receive I inherited like direct reports that have like a compensation like on the top of the range or even like higher, but the previous managers were really clear with them about that they were already at the age and they would need to grow if they wanted to get, maybe get a promotion to a different role if they want more. But I also receive people that just were like 30% like above the range for their role, and they were demanding more. Right?
Mm.
And when you talk with them about like the range and they already like, above the range, they start demanding a promotion, right? And not necessarily they have the skills to get promoted. And and that's a really hard thing to reconcile when there is this like overpaid person that doesn't have the skill to get promoted and want a raise or a bonus. It gets really difficult to manage. Uh, Sometimes you cancel that with a retention bonus or a spot bonus, but increasing the base salary is always difficult. And mostly not because we don't want to give those, but they probably not get approved
Mm.
by by legal or leadership in general. It's a difficult conversation. And there are other situations where you have a high on a moment of the market was like really difficult, and you need to spend more, and that create that imbalance between people that you hire at the low rate. They always end up finding that was the rate of the other person, and they are demanding like to be put at the same level. And that's also always like impossible to do. You can't just spend like a couple of millions like adjusting everyone to the same range.
Mm.
So it's a difficult. You need to navigate with the tools that you have. If you have budget, maybe you can find a solution where everyone gets something. If you don't have budget, then you need to have the conversation with them, saying just being transparent with it. You're not going to get a raise because of this and that reason. As long as you are transparent and you clearly communicate why, uh, you will be fine. They might decide to move and find another job, but at least you've been transparent with them.
Mhm. It's interesting when some companies share their approach to hiring salaries. For example, Netflix, that they hire the best and they pay top of the market. That's a simple strategy, a very expensive one, but a simple one. And not many people go that way, but some people expect for it to be like that you always get what you're worth in the market. You go for another offer and you get the offer and you say, well, can you match that? I think many people got really hurt when the end of 0% interest rates came and the market didn't quite crash, didn't even come into difficulty, but it basically leveled out and became really slow. Where before there was massive growth and everyone's mental model just changed to you're always growing very quickly or you're changing jobs and getting more money and money is just endless. And what I started doing out of kindness, although it disappoints people a lot, saying, look, you're being paid this. I can give you a very small raise as a gesture, a small one. Oh, well, but 2% is terrible. Yes, it's a gesture. It covers a little bit of inflation. But if you want to make peace with your pay at your current level, I genuinely recommend that you go out to the market and you interview. It's always good for practice, but also it gives you perspective on the things that you like in your current job or maybe you don't like. It gives you a more real outlook on things and a good baseline of what you are worth on the market. And while first people are taking it back, like how my manager telling me go interview with other people, there are caveats there, like, interview for outlook, not you're not worth anything to us. Go find another job. They find peace in that when you're really really adult with them and you're not treating them as children who need to be coddled and kept happy. You're treating them as adult with respect but also with realism. They calm down and they focus on their actual growth and then invest in growing their skills, growing their competencies instead of selling their skills, selling their competencies, threatening to leave, threatening to find a better offer.
Yeah. Well, I guess at the end of the day, it depends on the company approach, like you described before. There are some companies that if you don't ask for more, you will never be offered like a raise,
Mm.
right? So I can understand when people just come to you as your manager and say, "Hey, I want to raise. Let's have that conversation."
Mm.
And then you analyze why and the whys and how you can make that happen. But I think it's a good practice for anyone in the market to just constantly be testing your manager with that conversation.
Mm-hmm. How do you deny requests for raises and promotions? I've had some difficult discussions with a large team on why certain bonuses or raises were not very high, although the company reported really good results at the end of the year. But people thought, okay, if the company is doing phenomenal, then we're all getting paid more because they have a mental model of everyone having equity. But if you don't have equity, then no one says that if we have these massive results, then your bonus is going to be proportionate to that. No, like your bonus is usually fixed in your contract and discretionary. And you have to be real about this one. You accept the job. There's nothing unfair about it. How do you handle these denials,
Yeah.
which leave people disappointed?
Yeah, sometimes it's really difficult to realize that you're just a cog in the engine, and you say, okay, they are getting that money for my work, why they are not paying me more? But you fail to realize that it's not just you. You need to cover a lot of operations from the company that is covered with part of with the revenue that
Mm.
you're generating, and then the other aspect is who is taking the risk, right? You're not taking any risk as an individual contributor. You have your job, you have the salary. You might at some point just put in the people, whatever, or being laid off. That's a possibility, but you're not taking the risk on the business, right? is the owners of the company or the people that have the stock, the equity that is putting the money at the risk. So you need to realize, contextualize what is your situation within the company. So it's okay if you want like more, but always in the context of what's your position in the company, what's the risk that you're assuming by being that company. So having said that, the way that you prepare people from being disappointed is by clearly setting expectations was that what could happen, right? If you have a conversation with someone and you're working on race and you just communicate that 100% you're going to get this raise, and then you come have to have the conversation about a denied raise, that is a difficult one, right? Because you already made a commitment with that person about that raise. So never ever as a manager commit to giving a raise. Just commit to just make the case and presenting all the documentation and all the proofs if there is or the evidence, but never commit to just 100% giving a raise because at some point anyone in the chain could make the decision to stop. It could be because of like the economy situation and the financial situation. It could be a legal situation. So there are many different options there where why a salary or bonus could be denied. So you need to prepare everyone to that situation. And obviously there will be natural disappointment, right? But at least that people will have known that it was one of the possible outcomes. So they are disappointed, but they understand.
Yeah. I think around the globe, we're missing education for adults, basic education. So schools teach you physics, mathematics, etc., sometimes economics, but really no one tells you how, for example, businesses function, or there's very little at school about how governments function, how democracy, or in some countries not democracy, functions. Basically, what is the system in which people work? And people get the idea from, I don't know, colloquial facts, or from books, or from movies. They watch the Facebook movie and think that everyone who is a nerd in a Harvard dorm ends up a billionaire. And they're just lacking that context of how really these systems operate and get disappointed. So I think our job as managers sometimes is to explain how these things work without shielding people from politics or from the reality of business, which can be quite ugly. You don't have to make it look ugly, but you have to explain how the numbers add up. Another thing I think managers don't enjoy doing, getting people to do boring work. Of course, people are going to do what they're tasked with, but in engineering especially, and in more forward-looking companies, no one wants to do the boring stuff. And I'm not saying things like maybe maintenance or support, but anything that is not completely new, exciting, just the right amount of challenging, so you're in the flow, and with just enough difficulty, but not too difficult. How do you get your teams to do boring work without shoving it around the plate like green vegetables?
Well, that's a difficult one. I made me remember at the beginning of this conversation about how do you grow full stack, polyglot, like generalist engineer. Well, those are the kind of engineers that struggle the most with boring work. So you want to, that's why there is a space in the market for different profiles, right? And if you already have people in your team that could manage that kind of boring work, just yeah, delegate that to them, right? They will be happy to take it. They are going to do a good job. But if your team is full of those generalists, you're going to have a really hard time doing it, making them do it. But one way I implemented successfully, I think, is to show them what's the value of that work, how that's going to impact the business, how that's going to impact the user, the final user, because these kind of people just in general care a lot about the user who's using the platform and how they're going to use it. And if you can tie like that story or those points together, where okay, this boring work is going to have this much impact on the users, they are going to happily do it, right? And other times you just set the expectation that this is part of the job, right? Like it's part of the job and you need to do it, and it's as a high performing member of this team, you need to be able to manage different type of work, and the same applies to manage. Right? Sometimes you need to wear multiple hats, and it's part of your expectations as a leader to just fill the gaps. And the same happen at the engineering level. Sometimes we need to tackle boring technical debt. Sometimes we need to do boring like QA work. Sometimes we need to do boring like I don't know CSS styling, fixing, whatever. And yeah, you need to as a professional, you need to be grown like mature enough to do everything, right? Not just the work that is fun and shiny and full fits. Yeah.
You know how you can tell a good builder, and I'm talking about physical builders.
Mhm.
One of the ways I tell a good builder is how they clean up after themselves and how tidy their tools are. This is by far the least exciting part of their job, right? So, say they're
Mhm.
building a new piece of furniture, like a built in
Yeah.
furniture for you. Like looking at that, it's exciting. They always take their pictures for their portfolio, but they a good carpenter, for example, will clean up after themselves really well and keep their tools in order. Where I've seen people who just throw everything into one box and tell you, well,
Yeah.
I'm late for the next job. You vacuum things up, and the distinction is really clear. It's the same with engineers. Let's talk about the worst Dear HR grade moments in our careers. So things that were definitely not handled by HR manuals, maybe because we have worked in younger organizations, not of thousands of employees scale, but also something that maybe we hadn't prepared for personally. I'll
Mhm.
start. I know that you were involved as well. In 2022, when the war in Ukraine started, I was not prepared for that. So maybe in some countries in the Middle East, people have better processes. I know they do. But when the war started and we had a few people in Ukraine and a few people, foreign nationals actually, in Russia, and we cared deeply about them, but they were also on the critical path for projects, and we had to move them out, read the news 24/7 about which borders are being locked, etc., find them new places to live, find
Mhm.
flights that didn't cross over uh, countries which were associated with Russia. That was really difficult, and both on the logistical level, and given that we worked for a US company, the time zone level, but also on a personal level, because how do you support that person remotely when you have no idea what they're going through, but also they have no idea what they're going through? It's literally war. That was really, really tough, to be honest. That pushed me to the limit. And then, when you're dealing with it not for the first time, you almost feel like a bit callous because you already know how
Mhm.
to mentally handle this. So, for example, later after the war in Ukraine started, we had another team member in a country with civil war broke out, and they had to leave the country. And I felt both happy and kind of guilty that I was not as panicked as I was the first time because I knew exactly how to handle this as a people
Mhm.
manager and as a team manager. And then we had a candidate from not from Ukraine, although we had people from Ukraine as well. We had a candidate not from Ukraine who was applying for a position of a senior manager that had to be exposed to quite an intense project. And I had to make a difficult decision to not proceed with the application because there was risk they would have to go into a bunker for a week at
Mhm.
any point, and we just couldn't afford that at the moment because there was no one to backfill.
Yeah. Well, those are difficult decisions, of course, but at the end of the day, you're working for a business and you have other teams that will depend on these positions, and sometimes you need to make that decision. That's the unglamorous part of the job that we were talking
Mm.
about at the beginning. So you need to make decisions that might not be popular
Mm.
for your team or for other people, but it's a business decision and it's expected from your leadership to make those kind of decisions. Right?
Yeah,
You can make a decision based only on empathy to just affect the complete business and your teams because of that decision. So
this is
it's
gold.
really difficult to do that sometimes. And I had we were hiring as well. And we had candidates from Ukraine that were on the border. They were about to cross to Poland, or they didn't know where they were going to be the next day. So, and in those in some cases, we had to just say no to those applications because of the general situations, the uncertainty,
Mm.
and the inconsistency of that person.
Yeah. Let's talk about increasingly awkward things. It's a bit easier for you and me as non-native English speakers. I've had English and American managers hesitate to support an employee whose English wasn't that good, or whose written English was good, but their accent was so thick and their pronunciation was so bad, they were difficult to understand. I've had managers say to me, well, I can't tell them that they need to work on their English because that makes me racist or nationalist. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're hindering someone's career. You're withholding that feedback because it makes you feel like you are racist when you're not. It's nothing about race, it's about job performance. And we work through these, but I'm wondering how many people earn the side of not telling someone that they're using a rude gesture. For example, I've been the person to tell many of our American colleagues that when you talk to a British client and you want to say that there's two of something, you don't do this, you do this, because when you do this, this is like holding two middle fingers up in Britain. And the clients chuckled politely, but this was quite disruptive in some of the management meetings.
Yeah. Well, my take on this is that it's just another skill, right? And like in any other skill, it needs to be developed and improved. And you're not making anyone any favor by just holding that information, right?
Mm.
And yeah, I'm not a native speaker, and it took me a lot of time to just get to the level I am with my English, and I'm really proud of that. But it's also because people just coached me and helped me along the way, and told me where were my mistakes, where should I be improving, and just do the same with people that are not native speakers. If I detect that they could be improved, they could improve the language, I will tell them, and we even offer them longer conversations, or we suggest that they have like additional training. Uh, it's a must, I think, in a global environment where there is like English as the main language. It's an expectation for everyone to improve on that skill.
Mm. I know you've had.
And as you say, like you might be hindering their careers by not telling them, right? They might think that they're just okay with their English and they're not making the extra effort to improve.
Yeah, it's ruinous empathy, isn't it?
Hmm?
I know that you've had more awkward examples lately than English. My experience with that was more around things which we're normally not prepared for, even in personal lives, and that is death, including miscarriage, including suicide. This is something that until you've gone through it personally or at work, nothing prepares you for it. HR can give you some step-by-step training, but it will still catch you off guard. It will catch your team members off guard, most of them. Some will have more life experience. And again, it's something that you really have to address. It cannot be a taboo topic. So I really appreciate it when senior leadership shares their example uh, in such situations. And I've been lucky to work with CEOs and other C-level leaders who have openly shared their struggles with this. One of the worst examples I've seen, which luckily didn't end up in any tragedy, but the misunderstanding caused a lot of drama, was when a very senior engineer and architect, in fact, was having some banter over text message, not romantically involved at all, so completely team member banter, with a rather junior engineer. And he quoted one of his favorite authors and said, "We're born alone, we'll live alone, we die alone," in a text to a young junior. And he quoted one of his favorite authors and said, "We're born alone, we'll live alone, we die alone," in a text to a young junior engineer. And then he disappeared into the London Underground for 40 minutes, where obviously his service was down, and the engineer panicked because something in their conversation led them to believe that the senior engineer was about to end their life. So I think it came to a point where we were either about to call the police or actually called the police, and then he came back online. And there was no right or wrong in that conversation, because technically he hadn't done anything wrong and the other engineer hadn't done anything wrong, but it was something that required an hour of crisis management.
Yeah, I had to deal with not the same situation, but a teammate disappearing from one day to the other. And this was like a really good performer. We'll join one-on-ones every day. We'll communicate when going offline, etc. That kind of engineers. And one day he didn't show up to meetings, and he didn't show up to the next meeting. So I started just trying to contact this person through like all the official channels. Then I requested HR access to the emergency contact. We tried to reach out, just no luck. And then we ended up just sending the police to check on him. And it turned out that he had like some kind of like problem, like a health problem, an issue that he wasn't able to communicate with us. But it was just really difficult situation because you just the person that you're talking on a regular basis just disappear from one day to the other, and you don't know what's happening. The outcome of that situation was like me making HR, like collecting all the emergency contact information for everyone in the company, making sure that everyone was updating.
I think, we invest so much into things like incident management, disaster recovery, backups, testing backups, incident management drills in tech. But I don't think most technology companies do the same with HR or operations as much. Where with HR, it would make sense to run some drills to prepare people for this, because you probably want to be prepared for a team member being AWOL, or a team member behaving in an antisocial way because they were denied a promotion before this actually happens to you for the first time. And that could definitely be part of manager training.
Yeah, that training for sure could have been really useful in the early stage of my career for sure.
Yeah.
But that's why I say like you need to learn from experience. Even if you take the course, you take the training, nothing prepares you for what's going to happen in real life, right?
Yeah.
Because you have all these like training, you know the theory, right? But when it comes to practical, it's 100 times like harder. Just to deal with your emotions, to deal with others' emotions, that's pretty tough.
I've read this the other day about tech, that your first project gives you 100 or 1,000 times more experience than the first 1,000 tutorials. And it's the same here. I think your first HR moment gives you 1,000 times more than 1,000 HR manuals, doesn't it? I don't know how we survive in this role as people managers, but we both quite enjoyed, and I think, judging by peer feedback and report feedback are not that bad at it either. What is one piece of advice you would give to people who are considering going into management or maybe staying an individual contributor?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. My advices would be mainly around uh, just getting to know yourself, right? Because it's really important as a manager, as a leader, that you know uh, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are you good at, what do you enjoy, but also that you just stop and analyze your emotions, right? That's something I do a lot. Is when I feel something about a situation, I just don't react immediately. Well, I will do if it's an emergency and I need to make a decision, but the emotions I feel, it's just I tend to go and analyze them and try to understand why I'm feeling upset about this, why I feel happy about this, etc., etc. Trying to understand like the root cause of that emotion is really helpful for any leader, and mostly with your people manager, because you get to know a lot about yourself, but also about how other people live those emotions. So management is really cool when when you're getting involved in the tech side and engineer side. When it comes to people, that's the real challenge, right? That's when you need to exercise your empathy, when you need to put yourself in the other side. Is I wish like it would be like as easy as engineering in general, right? Like people engineering is is a lot harder.
Yeah, yeah. People engineering. I love how you call it.
Mhm.
Thank you. It's been just like one of those good old Friday evening engineering huddles, and years on, I'm still learning so much from you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, we went through like the hardest topics from managers, right? Well, I hope that we do another for the most like happy ones in the next one.
That's a good idea. And then a year on, we revisit and see whether we have found any even harder topics since then.
That's for sure. Thank you, Ala.
Thank you.